Rosenblum as we look into the week's events, the developments around the office of the St. Louis Circuit Attorney. And Kim Gardner, it's good to have you with us.
Good being here.
We're going to try to take a look at a few things and keep them separate. Many people in our audience have been watching not only the public statements from Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner, but there's also a contempt hearing. There's a separate push to remove her from office from the Attorney General. They each have different implications legally and politically. First of all, what did you make of her fiery speech on Saturday where she said, "I don't care if I'm the last one in my office"? Does that carry any weight when a judge considers the contempt hearing?
You know, the contempt is to the court, and that would be for Judge Noble to decide. But certainly her speech was contumacious at the very least. And from those statements that she doesn't care if she's the last person standing, you know, that was a precursor to two more lawyers leaving the office that Monday. So I said it before, she may just get her wish.
Mm-hmm. There was an advocate or a supporter of hers who approached the mic beforehand and said he sort of tipped his cap to the people in her office that were, quote, riding with her until the wheels fall off. I want to try to keep that front of mind, that this is not just a political spectacle, but the wheels of justice are grinding slower and slower and may fall off. There's actual impact to people who are sitting in jail today who don't get their day in court.
I mean, that's such an important thing to know. I mean, at no point would I ever say this was gender related or race related. This is just effectiveness related. This is whether or not the job is being done and whether the duties are being carried out. And because they're not, people are affected on multiple levels, not the least of which are people that we represent that are waiting for their day in court, may show up for their day in court, have the case dismissed, which sort of resets the clock, and then you keep waiting, especially if those individuals are incarcerated. On the other side of the equation, there's people that are victims of alleged crimes, and they're entitled to their day in court. The lawyers are affected because they have to work up cases on more than one occasion. They have to contact the prosecuting attorney. Or the assistant prosecuting attorney, and all these people that are left were good lawyers trying to do the very best they can under what I would consider untenable circumstances.
The circuit attorney has described her push to reform the office and also to sort of reform the police. She sees her relationship with the police as one where she can apply more scrutiny to their practices, to raise the bar on what kind of evidence they gather and submit before they bring charges. And she described herself to her supporters as somebody who is a victim of conspiracy and attack from people within her office, people outside of her office that circle up. Is there any truth to that? Can you evaluate the merit of what she's saying, that she came in as a polarizing force and met some pushback? Was there any?
I don't believe so. In fact,
none.
No, I don't believe so at all. I believe that there was a number of people on both sides of the equation that really thought this was going to be a good thing and believed that she was intending to do that. In fact, I know a number of lawyers, including myself, that initially was donating to her campaign in hopes of this reform that she talked about. There were some positive steps as far as diversion programs, but by and large, it was just as the court described, as Judge Noble described, sort of a rudderless ship of chaos, and you can't do business that way.
So we've talked some about this contempt hearing, which a judge basically said you've missed too many dates in court, too many hearings where there's serious charges on the docket, and we have to have some assurance that the prosecutor's going to show up and can't keep delaying this. Separately, the Missouri Attorney General is pushing to remove her through this legal proceeding quo warranto, and we've discussed this before on our air. You've said in the past that that's a pretty high bar to meet. However, the Attorney General believes they found a new piece of ammunition to make their case just this week, because the statute says, the Missouri law says, you must devote your time, full time and energy to this job. This is a special job. It's a privileged job. The state pays you $187,000 a year to do it. You got to be here all the time. We've now learned that Kim Gardner is enrolled in nursing classes to get a master's degree at St. Louis University. And the Attorney General says that alone is evidence that she's not giving her full time and attention to this. Therefore, we have a stronger case. What do you think about it? Is that a solid argument? Is there some liability that attaches there?
Well, again, I think you have to look at them separately. The quo warranto stands on its own, whether or not there's proof for that action versus whether or not she was in violation of the statute. It's sort of unheard of that a sitting circuit attorney is in an endeavor that takes up almost full time. You can't do it. I think what speaks loudest to me is the assistant circuit attorney that didn't go on record that said, oh my gosh, this explains why she was generally inaccessible and not around. You can't run an office. No office can run when the leader is inaccessible and not around. That just clogs up the entire system, especially when that person wants to be involved in recommendations on serious cases. Speaking from personal experience, it's not just getting the case to court. It's whether or not you can negotiate potentially a disposition short of trial. That happens in a number of criminal cases. But you can't when the assistant is so overworked and bogged down that they can't even respond to an email or a telephone call to even answer questions about discovery or evidence or whether or not there's going to be some sort of pretrial disposition. The system can't work like that, and it wasn't working. So these cases weren't getting any attention until the last minute when they were called, and oftentimes when they were called, if the assistant was so overwhelmed, that's when you got into the dismissals.
You mentioned the negotiating factor. A lot of lawyers view themselves as negotiators and have to have some leverage there. I talked to one prosecutor in Illinois who described the job sometimes as playing a poker hand. You go to a suspect and you say, here's what I've got, and maybe you're bluffing, maybe you're not, but you can get a plea deal done that way. How much leverage do you think Kim Gardner has right now in any kind of negotiation that might be going on?
Well, I mean, based on the track record at trial, because these cases are not being prepared, no matter how competent the last remaining lawyers are, they just can't do it. No lawyer can do it under those circumstances.
So are defense attorneys, and you're a defense attorney, are there defense attorneys who are just saying, let's take our chances, and we think we have the leverage right now?
Well, of course, but I mean, again, it's going to be case by case, but you always prepare cases for trial. Along the way, if there's a disposition that's satisfactory to your client, you have to not only entertain it, you have to discuss it with your client. But in these cases now, more often than not, it's not even getting to that point. There's nothing to discuss until people show up at trial. They may or may not be ready. Oftentimes they're not. Cases may be dismissed. And then maybe last minute there's some sort of negotiation. That's not the way the system should work.
Mm-hmm. So it's possible, theoretical or even likely, that there are defendants sitting in jail right now, not yet convicted, who might have accepted a plea deal if the prosecutor's office was more prepared.
100%, no question.
And that would be a conviction.
Sure, that would be a conviction, and it may, under the facts and circumstances, be appropriate, especially if the accused believes it's appropriate and the best thing for him or her family. That's something that happens all the time. Mm-hmm. But there has to be discussion. There has to be negotiation. It just doesn't happen organically.
If you're watching this stream now, you may have some interest in this issue about the St. Louis Circuit Attorney, a major American city where the wheels of justice, according to some supporters of Kim Gardner and the critics of her, certainly have said the wheels may be falling off in that office. And so we're watching that closely. Just today in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Kurt Erickson, the reporter there, quoted Senate Minority Leader John Rizzo, a Democrat, who said he spoke with Kim Gardner about the potential that she might resign. Right now, as we speak, there may be some wheeling and dealing behind the scenes. If she was to step down, we know the governor would appoint her replacement. And it sounded like what does that mean for her in her commitment to be deposed, to take the stand? Is all that a foregone conclusion that she would have to do all those things?
Well, I mean, that would be up to her lawyer, but certainly she would have to be deposed. She would be subject to deposition. If not, there would be particular sanctions that could be imposed because she would be a party defendant, and she has to, it's not like a criminal case, there's no Fifth Amendment right. Mm-hmm. So it's not surprising to me that the case has moved forward. To dismiss a case just on its pleadings would be very unusual. So there's going to be discovery, which means there's going to be depositions, there's going to be subpoenas, there's going to be documents gathered, and at that point, I would assume that there could be a summary judgment motion filed, and that would be up to the judge to rule on that issue.
Some of the people in our audience may know some of the history here. For those who don't, you were close to some of Gardner court proceedings in the past as they pertain to Eric Greitens, the former governor.
Right, I was a trial counsel for Eric Greitens.
In that, how would you describe her readiness or her willingness to be deposed or to take the stand?
She would have done anything necessary not to have been deposed. In fact, when the case ultimately got dismissed, we had named her as a witness because she had substituted herself for the investigator who subsequently was convicted. and then we were given the opportunity to have an offer of proof under oath. So that Friday, when she was scheduled to have that offer of proof under oath in front of the judge, that's when she dismissed the case.
So given your understanding, your history, your direct negotiation in something like this, different but similar, how do you think Judge Torbitsky's ruling this week, saying yes, this is going to trial, might have affected her thinking? Can you speak to that?
You know, I can't get inside her mind. She surprised me in the past, frankly, but I would not imagine she would want to be deposed under oath in any proceeding based on her past behavior.
Some people close to her politically describe her actions as sometimes unpredictable.
I would say unpredictable is a good way to describe her actions, and sometimes she gets dug in and unpredictable, which is not a good combination.
Also, I want to focus on one court case that happened today's Thursday, I believe this was Tuesday or Wednesday this week. There was a first-degree murder trial there was a murder in December of 2017. A grand jury recommended charges in February of 2018, 3 months later. There was basically, the basis was one eyewitness at the time. There was no physical evidence, there was no ballistics evidence, there was no other circumstantial evidence around there that would have supported this person. There was one eyewitness. A jury, there were 27 continuances leading up to the pandemic and through the pandemic. And at all of the end of this case just went to trial, and 12 jurors, only 11 of the 12 said the prosecutor has not met their standard, has not met their burden here, and it was a mistrial, a hung jury. That defendant sat in jail for 5 years. How normal would that have been, or how far out of the norm would that have been, that 5-year waiting period pre-pandemic?
Well, pre-pandemic, it would have been highly unusual. Almost, you never would see that unless there was something going on in the case, such as various psychiatric evaluations or something to take it off a trial docket. But assuming the case was on a trial docket pre-pandemic, that would almost never have happened. Now, post-pandemic, I mean, I would even say that's very unusual, 5 years. You know, I did read about that case, and it was interesting to me that at least the juror that was speaking talked about the disorganization of the prosecution's case, and that they presented a chaotic case, and because of that, they couldn't find guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And 11 of them couldn't find that. So a mistrial is just a hung jury, which means that person has to be tried again if they choose to. Now, I don't know what the state's going to do. I'm not that close to that case.
The defense attorney is going to file a motion to try to dismiss the charges. We'll see what the prosecution does.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens in that case. But at the very least, depending on the facts, I think a bond should be in order.
Perhaps a reduced bond?
A reduced bond, so that it doesn't have to wait again to get this case to trial.
We have camera feeds right now of the Carnahan Courthouse. That's the office building that contains the Circuit Attorney's office there. As people are watching for any news that may develop in that time. Scott Rosenblum, we want to thank you for adding some important context around the real-life impact about these matters of justice as they pertain to her office. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
We also caught up with Missouri Senator Josh Hawley earlier today, as the new ProPublica report revealed some more ethical questions around Clarence Thomas, the Supreme Court Justice. Watch.
Hello, Mark.
Senator Democratic Congresswoman Lois Frankel sold stock in First Republic before the federal government seized it and gave it to Chase, essentially. She also bought stock in Chase, JP Morgan, in that same time period. If she had inside information on that, that would already be criminal conduct and could be prosecuted. You want to raise that legal standard to tell members of Congress, hey, if you want this position of privilege, you can't even hold stocks like that just to avoid the appearance of impropriety here. Should she face investigation?
Well, I'm sure there will be, and there should be, a threshold investigation to make sure there's no insider trading. And what you just mentioned, Mark, if she did that based on information that only she had, that is not generally available to the public, that is illegal under current law. But it ought to be unethical across the board. I mean, no member of Congress should be buying and selling individual stocks for reasons just like this. Because the truth is, even if members of Congress don't get technically insider information, it is true that members of Congress nonetheless get information that is aggregated for them. They get directly briefed on issues that, frankly, the general public just doesn't have the time, or they don't get it presented to them on a silver platter in the way that members of Congress do. So that reason, besides the fact, listen, members of Congress shouldn't be spending their time thinking about how they're going to day trade on the stock market. There's no reason for that. They should be focused on doing what their constituents sent them here to do. So I would ban stock trading, stock ownership across the board for all members of Congress and members of the executive branch and leadership positions. I just think that this is an obvious thing to do.
I think you've even said something to the effect of you feel so strongly about this because even that appearance of public corruption enrages you. Last time we spoke, you didn't dispute the documented facts around Clarence Thomas, that a billionaire GOP mega donor was paying for lavish vacations. We've since learned more. But what you did, though, was you questioned the motives of the people who brought those facts to light. We've now learned that the same donor has bought Clarence Thomas's mother's house, allowed her to live there rent-free, and now just today, ProPublica reporting further that this donor was spending $6,000 a month in private boarding school tuition for his grandnephew, someone who he took in, had custody over, and called a son. So far, the defense has been, well, they're just friends. Senator, I don't know. I've got friends. We go to a baseball game, or they might pick up a tab, or they'll send me a Christmas card, but they're not sending me to exclusive vacations and resorts and paying for families' tuition. Do you really think Clarence Thomas would be getting this treatment if he wasn't sitting on the Supreme Court?
Listen, I think the question is what he's doing, is what he's alleged to have done, has any of that violated the law? Has any of it violated any ethics laws? Has it violated any reporting requirements? And the answer, as far as I can tell to all those, is no. Which brings us back to, what is this really about? And I think we know the answer to that, and we got at it in our hearing earlier this week when I talked about the letter that a bunch of Democrats have signed where they say to the court, we're going to compel you, that was their word, compel you to do what we want you to do by withholding funding until you stop being recalcitrant. That was the big word they used. I mean, this is congressional coercion using money. By the way, just so happens exactly the same amount of money that the court has asked for security is what these Democrats want to withhold. Now, if that's not a dog whistle, I don't know what is. So
everybody agrees
that
the justices should be safe.
You want to talk about across-the-board ethics reform? Fine. We were just talking about stocks. I don't think members of the Supreme Court should buy or sell a stock. I mean, I do a uniform rule across the board. So that's one thing. But going after members of the court to try and delegitimize them and trying to compel the whole court to do what you want by threatening them, I think is wrong. And it raises serious, serious constitutional issues.
I think everybody agrees public officials and the public should be safe.
Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Last analogy, let's just swap out the characters real quick because maybe we can see this issue more clearly. Just this week, the U.S. Attorney landed 4 criminal convictions against power player lobbyists in Illinois because they were giving jobs or other benefits, things of value, to allies and friends of former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan in attempts to influence him and corrupt his position of public trust. They went down for conspiracy and bribery. They may go to jail. If you can't do that at a state house, why should you be allowed to do it at the Supreme Court?
Now, Mark, I think we need to be clear here that there are no allegations of that kind of criminal misconduct, any kind of misconduct about Justice Thomas, right? I mean, if there are, I'm not aware of them. Nothing that I have seen reported, nothing alleges any ethical violation under the rules he's subject to. In fact, there's not even reporting violations. It's not even like he filed the wrong paperwork. He wasn't required to disclose any of this stuff. Now, we can have a debate about whether the reporting requirements ought to be different, but I just want to be crystal clear here that it's not as if like, oh my gosh, the guy is out there and doing all this stuff and it's illegal. That is simply not the case, not on what has been alleged. I mean, look at Justice Sotomayor, who I gather got $3 million in a book deal and didn't recuse herself from any of the cases surrounding the parent company. Is that unethical? I mean, we can have a debate. It's not required, though, currently, under the ethics rules. My point is this. If you want to talk about across-the-board ethics rules, I'm here for that. If you want to ban stock trading government-wide, I'm here for that. I mean, I think we've got major ethics issues in government, no doubt. If you want to tell the court, though, we're going to threaten you, we're going to go after you, we're going to threaten your security, we're going to threaten your funding, we're going to turn the lights off in your building, unless you start doing what Congress tells you to do on any host of issues, I think that is a huge, huge problem. And I think that's what the Democrats are doing here.
I thought you were in a position to call that kind of conduct out. That's why I wanted to ask you. Okay. Thanks for joining us.
All right, Mark. I got to go talk to your colleagues. Talk to you soon.
And we're joined now by Anita Manion, our political analyst, with reaction to our discussion with Senator Hawley there. First of all, there's no claim right now that the documents alone or the disclosures alone, the lack of disclosure on the part of Clarence Thomas broke a law, except there's the appearance of influence peddling, and maybe some of the way the documents were withheld could raise other questions. How did you evaluate his sort of defense there?
Well, I'm not an attorney, but it seems to me the reporting requirements require justices to report the real estate sale. So that seems to be the one that actually is pretty glaring. And previously, Justice Thomas had to amend returns because he didn't report his wife's income. And then we have the more current issues with the vacations, which they've recently clarified those reporting requirements to say that needs to be reported moving forward. So there does seem to be a pattern of, poor filing at the very minimum, and some might say cover up or unethical behavior.
Republican appeal, Donald Trump's appeal, Josh Hawley's appeal in the Midwest, in Missouri, has often tapped into that resentment of elitism on the coast against us that don't really have all those benefits.
Sure.
How does this incident and that exchange you just saw there impact Josh Hawley's ability to sell that message to Missouri voters?
I think the thing is, even though we can say, boy, these are super yachts and lavish vacations and expensive private schools, it doesn't seem to matter in a lot of ways at this point if you're speaking from the right team. Because if you think about some of Donald Trump's allegations, most of us can't relate to allegedly paying $130,000 in hush money. But still that same populist message seems to come through. The idea that these people, we are being wronged and we need to fight back.
We want to switch gears here because we do want to tell you there's been a minor development at the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office. We know that at 3:40, in about 20 minutes or so, there's a mandatory meeting of the staff being called to Kim Gardner's office. We don't yet know the context around that meeting. We do know that there have been discussions, according to a report in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, that Kim Gardner, the circuit attorney, has discussed with the Senate Minority Leader John Rizzo at least the prospect of what a post-resignation might look like for the future of that office. That's significant because it means Kim Gardner is at least engaging in those discussions. There is no concrete evidence at this time that she's chosen to go in that direction, only that she's discussed it. So let's talk about the political vacuum that would be created, or let's talk about just the political games that might be happening here. We know the governor would appoint her replacement, and we know the governor has said he wouldn't do so without talking to people like the mayor or other elected officials, black officials in the city of St. Louis about the future of that prosecutor's office. What are some of the different negotiations that you could see in a situation like that?
Yeah, I think, if you're Mayor Jones, you want this mess to end. And if it's done in this way, where you can leverage maybe influencing legislation in the state legislature, maybe having more of a say in who replaces Kim Gardner, then that's to much a greater benefit than if this lingers on for another year, goes through multiple court cases, and in the meantime, seemingly your prosecutor's office is imploding. So I think that if they can get this done, that is politically advantageous to Mayor Jones and also will help her moving forward to keep that continuity.
We also just heard, it's hard to really know exactly what the circuit attorney is thinking, but we heard from her on Saturday this week when she gave this big speech and she said, I'm not leaving, I'm not resigning, you're going to have to remove me. That seemed to invigorate the Attorney General, who met the press, met the media yesterday and said he's moving forward to trial and he'll do everything in his power to push her out. How do you look at her rhetoric, and do you see evidence that it's catching on, that she's rallying a base, or how effective has she been in that sort of defense?
I think she does still have a base of supporters, but I think it's been shrinking and shrinking. We've seen allies like Mayor Jones say months ago that she needs to really rethink if she's meant to be in this position and does she still have the public trust. So I don't think you hear many, certainly not many public figures speaking out in her defense anymore.
It's been quite a journey watching just how quickly, I don't know if you could say fall from grace. I don't know that Kim Gardner was ever the most popular political figure in Jefferson City, but certainly you couldn't find a lot of St. Louis Democrats to speak a cross word against her really before Mayor Jones made that public proclamation. Since then, it's been interesting to watch the political wheels turn here. There are a number of people. Right now, there's a state takeover discussion of the St. Louis Police Department. There are a number of other discussions that are happening at the Jefferson City level, and it looks like everyone's looking for their own little angle to get in on this.
That's politics, right?
I guess it is. How should St. Louis remember who Kim Gardner has been, what she has meant to the city of St. Louis from a political perspective, aside from the courts and the administration of justice, but the voice, who she's represented?
Yeah, and I think, her argument would be she is a historic elected official, as the first black woman to hold this position, that she came in as a progressive prosecutor, and I think she would note some accomplishments that she would say she's made, including, saving a person's life.
Lamar Johnson.
That's right. And so I think that, she would like that to be her legacy. Unfortunately, I think there's been a lot of messiness, particularly in the last several months, that might override that legacy.
We made a simple comparison in some of our reporting that really, I think, drew a reaction from people. If they come for me, if the system comes for me, they're going to come for you next.
Yeah.
This is all a witch hunt.
Yeah.
Where have you heard that before?
Oh, I'm with you, Mark. Yeah, this language that Donald Trump used so successfully and has been used by many other people, including Eric Greitens and including Kim Gardner, two people on very different sides of these issues, right?
It's never a good sign. If you say, I'm not going to resign, usually it's kind of like the coach in baseball, to use that analogy, where they say, or the general manager gives the coach their stamp of approval, like, I think they're doing a great job. Usually that means there's some trouble coming next. How much of a come from behind would it be? How high is that hill for Kim Gardner to climb out of at this point? Does she have a political future?
I hope nursing school goes well for her. I think it's going to be hard for her in St. Louis politics at this time. Her image has been so tarnished, and I think we never saw that turnaround. So I think people are forgiving and they like a comeback story. And had she went to the depths and then we saw the office improving, I think she might have a chance. But that's not what we've seen. Mm-hmm.
And we talk so much about politics and appearance and the message that you're giving. Our last question would be this. There was really never that moment. I think in the 24 to 48 hours after that Janae Edmondson tragedy, which was one that captured the attention of so many people. It was one moment out of many, but it really seemed to galvanize the effort against her. She had a window to step up and say, you know what, this grieves me too. Yes. This is going to further motivate our office to do better, and we are committed to get to the bottom of it, fix it, make sure it never happens again. We never heard her say that.
No. I think the way she handled that was the tipping point, and that's when we saw Mayor Jones and others turn on her.
Is the window passed? Is it too late for her to come out and say, would it be just too late at this point?
I think it is.
Yeah. Usually never too late, but there we have it from Anita Mannion. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We do have extended coverage. We didn't have time for it on this program, but you can go to our website, KSDK.com, to see our recent interview with Bill DeWitt, the president of the St. Louis Cardinals, in his push to legalize sports betting, what it would mean for the competitiveness of the field, of the team on the field. That is up on our website now. Until next week, we're off the record.